It doesn't make a difference right now. David is interested right now in a very important matter. He's about to bring the Aron Hashem, the Ark of God, that's been laying in a place in the hills between Beit Shemesh and Yerushalayim, in Beit Aminadav, in the corridor of Yerushalayim. He wants to bring it. Now, do you remember? We had a Mishkan, a tabernacle that lasted 369 years in the town of Shiloh. It was destroyed, as we learned about it in Samuel 1, beginning of this book. Ever since the Mishkan was destroyed, the Ark was in exile. Who destroyed the Mishkan in Shiloh? Do you remember? It was the Plishtim. They exiled the Holy Ark. The Ark is the most holiest vessel in the miniature temple called the Mishkan, or in the Holy Temple, and it houses 2 tablets of testimony of the 10 Commandments and a Sefer Torah inside it. And it's been out of her hands for a while. And what we noticed about here is we have a major altar in Givon, just north of Yerushalayim, a few kilometers. However, that pseudo Mishkan there has been without the Holy Ark. The Ark right now is sitting in a Jewish village in the corridor of Yerushalayim. David wants to transport it, and bring it to Yerushalayim. Why? It's apparent to us, King David, who's such a great scholar, a philosopher, a poet, a prophet, a chief of staff, all in one. He realizes that the future political system of the kingdom of Israel has to be based on Torah. Has to be based on Torah. There's nothing that greater symbolizes the power of Torah of the Jewish people than the Holy Ark, the Aron HaKodesh. And to transport it and bring it to Yerushalayim has so much importance. And therefore, David, what he's doing right now is that he's going to order the bringing. And who's going to be collected together? 30,000 people at least. Okay? This is now assembly number 2. Let's see what David does and what happens, right? We're now talking about going down west on the Yerushalayim Tel Aviv road to a place called Kiryat Ye'arim. Some of you may see it. There's an exit on the Tel Aviv Yerushalayim highway. Okay? It's just about 10 kilometers down, right after Mevaseret Zion. Let's see. Pasuk Bet. Vayakom, Vayelech David, V'chol ha'am asher ito mibalei Yehuda. Right? We're going now to a Judean village down the road. Right? Could be hours of traveling in those times. Today with your car it's 15 minutes. And he's going there, lehalot misham, to bring up from there et Aron Elokim. Asher nikra Shem Hashem tzvaot Yoshev Kruvim alav. We know that the ark has several nicknames, and almost all of them are listed here. Okay, it's called, the name of God is on this ark. God, who's the Yoshev Kruvim. Remember what the Kruvim are? You mentioned it yesterday. Okay, so David right now is making a strategic decision to transit the Holy Ark to Yerushalayim to give his kingdom spiritual holy power. Now, do you remember? Let's briefly trace when the Ark was taken into exile by the Plishtim. It was brought to southwestern Israel. Wherever they put it in their shrines, the Plishtim were hit by God. Their idols broke. Havoc was caused in their country. The Tchorim, Achbarim were causing economic devastation in their fields. What did the Plishtim decide to do? They voted and decided, let's get rid of it, let's send it back. So they took out a new wagon, placed the Holy Ark on a new wagon. Who did they tie to the wagon? Cows, mother cows even. that were nursing their calves, their eglot, and miraculously, the agala, the new wagon, led by the cows, transited them all the way up to the Beit Shemesh hills and brought them to a place called Kiryat Yearim. It's been there for a while, hasn't it? How will David bring it up now? Pasuk Gimel. Vayarkivu, verse 3, Vayarkivu et Aron Elokim el agala chadasha. Vayisau mi Beit Avinadav asher bagiva, right, on this hilltop of Kiryat Yearim, in the house of Avinadav. Ve'uza ve'achyo, two brothers, b'nei Avinadav, noagim et agala chadasha. So it's very interesting. Now, who is Avinadav? He's had, for a few, probably decades, or a little less, he has been housing the Holy Ark. Rashi, here in his commentary, according to Chazal, Rashi said that Avinadav was a Kohen. That's number one. He was a priest. And now, what did they decide to do? And of course, this must be under David's instructions. Two sons of Avinadav, Uzzah and Achio, what are they doing? They're leading the Agala. They're the drivers. In other words, are they doing like the Plishtim did, or they're doing differently? The Plishtim had cows leading the new wagon, and not any human beings. Everything was done metaphysically. Here, a decision is made, and human beings, children of Avinadav, are what? Leading the Agalot. I'm sure they have what? They have cows or heavy ox to lead them, but there are drivers here. It says Uzzah and Achio. Now, what do you remember from your study of the book of Bamidbar regarding the transit of the Holy Ark? We're going to learn next week in Parshat Naso that what was built for transiting the tabernacle, there were rings around, many articles, but what was, there are poles, but what was issued to there are three sons of Levi, Gershon, Kehat, and Merari. There were many agalot that were built with all the contributions. Many wagons were built. What was the purpose of the wagons? To transit the Mishkan and its kelim and its vessels. Gershon and Merari were issued all the agalot. One son and their family were not issued any agala. Which one? Kehat. Why? Kehat, as it says, Bakatef Yisa'u. Bakatef Yisa'u. Kehat will be carrying the Holy Ark. They're not going to be carrying the Ark, not with their hands, not on a wagon, but rather on poles and on their shoulders. Bakatef Yisa'u, very good. And that's how they're going to carry it. Now that's stated in next week's parasha. It's a commandment. What's your question?
Same idea.
Masakumta.
Exactly.
Right? In the army, when the unit has been trained to a certain amount, they make a journey. It's called Masakumta, where they're earning their beret. Okay? And during that journey, they often schlep soldiers on top of the stretcher, which is heavy, and you're climbing mountains and you're sweating and then you switch off and so on and so forth. So the ark is being carried like you're carrying in the army. Our question here is, here we see that they're using a new wagon just like the Plishtim used. However, they're using drivers. Okay? Uzzah and Achio are going before the ark, and they're helping to drive the cattle that's driving them. Let's keep on reading. Pasuk Dalet. Vayisumi Beit Avinadav, and they start traveling from there. By the way, the topography from the area called Kiryat Yearim to Yerushalayim is an ascent. I don't know if it's 600 meters above sea level, 700. Yerushalayim is certainly 800. And David wants to bring it now to Yerushalayim. Instead of, there's a major place of serving God called in Givon. In Givon, that's where the semi-Mishkan is. That's where the major altar is. But that Mishkan is lacking because it doesn't have the Holy Ark. Doesn't have the Holy Ark. Let's read. Vayisumi Beit Avinadav. They start traveling, they're lifting it up on the wagon. Im Aron Elokim. V'achyo olech lifnei Aron. Achyo himself is walking before. Now remember, the 30,000 people in this procession here. That's a tremendous assembly, and they're leaders of Israel. The excitement must be very special because the Aron was stationary for several years in Beit Avinadav. What is David doing? Pasuk 5, Pasuk Hey. V'David v'chol Beit Yisrael. Misachakim. What are they doing? Misachakim. I know the word l'sachek means to play, but here it's misachakim lifnei Hashem. And therefore the commentators explain they're dancing, they're singing, they're playing instruments. That's what the misachek is, as it says right now. Bechol atzei broshim, all the musical instruments they're using. Kinorot. What is a kinor? No, the instruments were made out of wood. Right, the eitz brosh, right. So we have kinorot and violins and harps, nevalim, utupim, drums, uviminamneim, mitzeltzilim. We have all these type of instruments. We have an entire orchestra of the King of Israel. Everyone's happy. David is jumping up and down of happiness, and they're walking it. They're not putting it in a limousine and everyone's getting onto, a chartered bus or something like that. They're walking up to Yerushalayim. Pasuk Va, verse 6. Vayavo ad Goren Nachon. Vayavo ad Goren. Some of you know from learning Mishnayot that a Goren is a threshing floor. Ken, for all you city boys, a threshing floor is where we bring the wheat or any corn or grain, and we have the animal stomping on it, and by doing so, the kernels of corn are separated from the chaff, and that's how we accumulate. So they arrived to a place called Goren Nachon. Nachon is apparently the name of the Goren, and apparently, as you know, in order for a threshing floor to be successful agriculturally, it has to be on a plain area. It has to be a very flat area, and not, ups and downs and bumps and hills, etc., etc. Because when you have the cattle walking around, you don't want them to slip up and down and fall, and so on and so forth. What happens here? Vayvod Goren Nachon. Vayishlach Uza el Aron ha'Elokim vayochez bo ki shametu abakar. Something weird happened, that in spite of the fact that it was likely to be shatuach, flat, here we see that the attachment between the agala and the reins of the cattle, it slips, it frees open, and it seems that now the wagon is tilting the other way. And if the wagon is tilting the other way, what's about to fall? What's about to fall? The Aron. Now this is what they see with their human eyes. What does Uzzah decide to do? He stretches out his hand in order to prevent what he thinks in his eyes would be a desecration of God's name, that the Holy Ark fall on the floor. However, we know that the Torah prohibits the touching of the Ark. Did I bring it in this source page? Yes. It says in Bamidbar chapter 4, there's a Torah prohibition to touch the Ark. They can't touch it. They can carry it through the poles, through the rings, but no touching. So, in spite of the fact that the Torah prohibited it, Uzzah thinks that right now the most proper thing to do to prevent the desecration of God's name is to stretch out their hands and be a good baseball catcher and catch the Aron. Is that the right thing to do?
Towards about a fall, you don't keep it touch it. You're not gonna catch it.
You're using human logic. It sounds right, but I'm reading the next pasuk, and it says that God is not interested in this action. Pasuk Zayin, Vayichar af Hashem be'uzah. God's anger is kindled at Uzzah on the spot, out of his tranquility of catching the ark. Vayakeu sham Elohim ala shal. Shal from the word shalva, out of his tranquility. Vayamot sham im Aron Elokim. So there's a big disturbance. There's a lot of attribute of judgment here, a lot of awe. And we have to understand what fatal mistake happened here. One of the most fatal mistakes that happened here is David thinks that you're allowed to transport the ark on a wagon, just like the Plishtim transported the ark on a wagon. Okay? Furthermore,
is that the reason why they were fell from the wagon? Because Hashem didn't intend them to use the wagon, rather like carrying the Levi on the shoulders?
Furthermore, along the lines of this thinking, I once heard a shur from Rav Kashtiel from Eli, and he would explain there has to be absolute metaphysical faith in the oneness of God vis-a-vis this holy ark. What is the holy ark? The holy ark, made out of gold, with made out of wood with gold on the inside, gold on the outside, is the holiest article that we have in our holy temple / Mishkan, placed in the area called the what? Kodesh HaKodeshim, the Holy of Holies. Do we serve Hashem on the ark on a daily purpose? Once a week? Once a month? Once on Yom Kippur. The holiest member of the Jewish people, on the holiest day of the year, goes inside with his incense offering, with the blood of several other offerings, and it's placed in between the two poles. In between the two poles, which is the width of the ark, atop the ark are these two cherubites, kruvim, baby-like faces or angelic-like faces, and in between the wing expansion of the two kruvim, God's voice comes down. Okay, kruvim, God is shochen, dwelling in that area. When God prophesies to Moshe Rabbeinu in this Mishkan during 40 years, or later prophesies for 369 years, and this prophecy, even though it may be scarce, it comes through the Kodesh HaKodeshim. The ark, just to give you an example, the dimensions of the ark to contain the two tablets and a Sefer Torah, according to one opinion, Baba Batra. Another opinion, there's a shelf outside the ark that the Sefer Torah is put on. The width of the ark is like the width of the two tablets. How do you put it in? The Talmud gives us a metaphysical answer, that the laws of physics, the laws of our physical realm and dimension, are not applicable to the ark. Halakha number 1. Halakha number 2. When we were crossing the Jordan River as a nation, led by Yoshua ben Nun, and the Kohanim are carrying the poles of the ark, the Talmud says that the ark was carrying the carriers. The ark was carrying the carriers. So we have to, Walt Disney right now, imagine the power of our imagination. Whoop! And we're across the Jordan River. That's better than any downtown ferry you can, pay 5 shekels for and get across the Jordan River. That situation, too, is an expression that the ark belongs to the metaphysical. So too here. There was a mistake made by David as the leader. The Radak says, I'll just transliterate, Rabbeinu David ben Kimchi in France in 1400s, one of the great commentators of the Tanakh. He says that it really was not worthy to carry on a wagon led by cattle. Rather, it had to be carried on the shoulders of the Levium. It should have been carried by the shoulders of the Levium. Yisrael, the nation, knows that the carrying of the ark, as it's stated in next week's Parsha, Bamidbar chapter 4, quote, V'livnei kahat lo natan. Moshe did not distribute or allocate wagons to the families of Kahat. Why? Ki avodat hakodesh aleihem bakatef yisau. They're carrying the most holy of all articles of the Mishkan. Remember, there are those that are carrying the planks and the boards of the Mishkan. There are those that are carrying the curtains and the roofings of the Mishkan. But the ones carrying the most holy of articles, the Mizbachot, the Menorah, the Holy Ark, they're not going to be transporting it on wagons. Rather, to show that it's more holy, they're taking by the poles on their shoulders. Okay? Therefore, they sinned in this matter. And God showed them, in the attribute of din, of judgment here, God showed them the holiness of the ark twofold. Number one, in spite of the fact, I made a mistake when I showed you that, oh no, the wagon is now topping, what is the expression? Tipping over, thank you. If we're talking about a threshing floor, by definition, the threshing floor is flat. There should be no tipping whatsoever. God is showing, the Radak is explaining, the fact that the bakar was disattached from the wagon, and this falling down, something supernatural happened. It should not have happened according to the laws of nature. And the fact that Uzzah still put out his hands on a natural way to save it, that too is a sin. Where is the mistake that David made? As the leader here, David is giving the orders. He's the king. David is the most scholarly of all people there. How did David make a mistake? Isn't this an explicit pasuk? You don't have to be a rabbi to understand this pasuk, okay? And say, Rabino. Even I can read, and I'm only learning Torah a few years. How you don't have to be called a rabbi to understand the pasuk. You have to carry it. So what is David's mistake? By carrying it on a wagon, even though it says you have to carry the ark on your shoulders. Answer: David misunderstood the section in the book of Bamidbar, when we have a Mishkan inside the desert, and God is commanding to carry all these matters, okay, on wagons, but the holiest items on the shoulders. David thought that's only for when we are in the desert and carrying the Mishkan matters. But when Aleph, we're not in the desert, and Bet, we're not carrying the Mishkan, all we're carrying right now is the Aron, then there's no sin in carrying on the Agalot. And we're all witnessed that the Plishtim, I know they're not Jewish people, but they transported, and it was all fine. No bombastic event happened as a result of the Plishtim carrying it here. Regarding Uzzah, I want to say this. God is teaching us a tremendous lesson here, that again, the laws of the physical world are really not applicable to the Holy Ark. The Holy Ark, okay, of all the articles of the Mishkan, are related to the divine, are related to the metaphysical. Like we gave a few examples, that as if the dimensions of the ark are not part of the physical world, so too the holiness is so holy, it's not regular holiness, it's Kodesh HaKodeshim, and so on and so forth. My dear friends, here's a breach in the law. And what happens with David? David probably is very disappointed. Pasuk Chet, verse 8. Vayichar le David. Do you notice something different? than the Vayichar in verse 7? There in Pasuk Zayin it says Vayichar af Hashem. And here it says Vayichar with which preposition? Le David. So we know that it cannot be incidental. So when it says Vayichar af Hashem, they're clearly talking about great anger. But when it says Vayichar le, we're talking about sorrow. We're talking about disappointment. He's very full of sorrow. Vayichar le David. Okay? What about Al Asher Paratz Hashem Peretz Be'uzah? That God breached, God acted suddenly with punishment here regarding the person called Uzzah, and therefore it's a substantial matter. The place is called Vayikra Makomu Peretz Uzzah Adayom Hazeh. Adayom Hazeh? What could the term Adayom Hazeh mean in the Sefer Tanakh? Yeah, what does it mean?
Forever.
Until the end of the Sefer, whatever decades we're talking about, during those decades, the name was Peretz Uzzah. That's what they called the place. They continued to call the place based on this manner. Ad Hayom Hazeh, until the book is published, finished, ended by the contributing prophets. It was Natan, Gad, and before in Shmuel. So, right now, we're in a pause. We see the pause happening. Pasuk Tet, Vayira David et Adonai bayomahu, Vayomer ech yavo elai aron Adonai. David, of course, is saddened. David has a big problem, and he doesn't know exactly what is the plan. How will David be able to overcome this matter? The Malbim explains here, gentlemen, that David clearly understands that he was not careful enough with the honor of the Holy Ark, and the fact that there's some good in it. In everything that we see that's bad, we can see some good even in tragic events. The fact that this place continued to be called Peretz Uzzah, okay? There's certainly a lot of mourning, a lot of sadness going on nationally for the Jewish people that we lost a member called Uzzah because of the Holy Ark. Okay? But maybe what we're gaining is Vayira David et Hashem. As a result of this episode, David has more fear of God. He now understands that maybe he acted in this event out of simcha, happiness. A major event is happening. We're bringing people. We're playing music. We're dancing. We're singing. The element of simcha. Some of you know this famous pasuk, Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha, Gilu bir ada. A famous pasuk in Tehillim. What does it mean? Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha, serve God with happiness. And then it says, Gilu birada, rejoice in trembling. How do you rejoice in trembling? Either you're happy or you're sad, or you're a psycho case, and you're both happy and sad at the same time, right? There's God forbid someone has manic depression. He has high and lows. Sometimes he's very happy, sometimes very depressed. Okay, so the Malbim explains here. David landed from this high spiritual level. David was always serving God out of love, out of rejoicing, out of happiness, and maybe not enough yirah, not enough fear. And now, more fear is instilled in the heart, in the soul of David, and now he's landing in a more balanced situation. A more balanced situation. Remember what the Sefer Achinuch writes regarding the multiple mitzvot that the Jewish people were commanded. We have a multiple, 613. How many positive mitzvot? 248 positive mitzvot. How many mitzvot lo taseh, negative commandments? 365. Sum total, 613. Sefer Achinuch, in his introduction to his Sefer of all the explanations of all the 613 mitzvot according to the portions of the week, explains in a very simple way, but it's so deep really, that each and every positive mitzvah, each positive mitzvah that I learn about, that I support, that I perform, the more I do on behalf of Hashem, the more love, the more identity, the more connection I'm building. Okay? The more connection, the more love. And on in the parallel sense, the more I stay away from the red line and I don't cross that red line, I don't violate the negative prohibitions of the Torah, I'm adhering and inhibiting myself at the same time by learning the prohibition. What is it about? What is it? What is the depth of it? What am I instilling in myself? Fear. Okay? By not doing, by not violating, there's a distance that I'm creating, which is very important. Because if a person serves Hashem only with love, only with happiness, there are many times he might cross the red line and violate various violations. Whereas the other way around as well. If a person is just filled with fear, he's trembling all the time, what is going to be inhibited? His activity, his innovation. He's not going to be doing the mitzvot, the positive mitzvot of the Torah, because he's always full of what? Fear. Am I making a mistake? Is this correct? Maybe I violated him. He's always second thinking, third thinking himself. Therefore, the proper way to serve Hashem is a balance. Is a balance of positive mitzvot and negative mitzvot. And now, maybe the good thing that's coming out is Vayira David et Hashem bayomahu. Don't understand this pasuk. Oh, David has now Yirat Shamayim. Before then, he didn't have fear of God. Of course, he had fear of God. But this great event instilled in him a certain level, depth, significance of fear of God that he didn't properly address this great event. He addressed the event only out of happiness. He didn't address the event also out of fear. And now he's learning his lesson. We'll continue with this point tomorrow. Bezrat Hashem.